Okay, I think everybody's in from the waiting room. We have just enough for a quorum for the meeting. This is the December 11th Bicycle Pedestrian Subcommittee meeting of Transportation and Parking. The meeting is being recorded and will be sent to Northampton Open Media for them if they wanted to keep this and post it for however long they want. We've got kind of a full agenda, so I want to go ahead and start. But first up, before we start with with public comment, I want to introduce everyone to our newest ICPED member. Sean Condon is here joining us. So welcome, Sean. The other members on the committee are James Lowenthal, Brett Constantine, Devin Bruce, Director LaScalia, myself, and we have Nick Horton, who is not here. He couldn't make it today. I think I called out everybody, but it looks like, so welcome. Thank you for joining. And so with that, I just want to note that we have a quorum with those members. And I will open the floor to public comment. And this is for items other than what's on the agenda. So let's start. Alex Bowman, I will ask you to unmute and you can make a public comment.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity. As someone who doesn't own a car, I often rely on my bicycle for transportation. You may recall me saying previously that it shouldn't take an act of bravery to get around on a bike. Northampton was an incredible network of private trails that serve as key connections within the city and to neighboring communities. These trails are a true asset, but to fully realize their potential, we need to do more to encourage cycling through better maintenance and thoughtful enhancements. More and more people are discovering bicycles and e-bikes are practical for shorter trips and can be used year-round in all types of weather. Compared to cars, cycling reduces traffic congestion, frees up coveted parking spaces, improves public health, and fosters stronger social connections. It's a transportation mode that benefits people of all ages, abilities, and incomes. Moreover, the same infrastructure that supports cyclists also serves those who rely on mobility devices. However, there's a significant difference between making it possible to bike and making it easy to bike. What is even making cycling easy and convenient? For comparison, think about the steps we routinely take to ensure safety and convenience for vehicles. We repair potholes and hazardous bumps. We trim vegetation that obstructs roadways. We address areas that are prone to standing water and provide safe spaces to pull over where possible. We plow and treat roads to ensure the entire traveled width is safe. Shouldn't we hold bicycle infrastructure to similar standards? Creating an entire city where biking is safe and convenient for people of all abilities is an ambitious goal, but it's achievable if we start small. Let's commit to defining and maintaining high standards for our existing trails, the backbone of our bicycle network. Doing so will instill confidence that choosing to bike is both practical and viable. Moreover, let's take care to plan with vision and innovation. While recent projects have addressed overdue maintenance and made progress, they also reveal missed opportunities to iterate toward truly world-class infrastructure. Even small design details like ensuring proper shoulders and curbs can make a big difference for both those who use the infrastructure and those who maintain it. By building on these efforts and committing to continuous improvement, we can ensure Northampton remains a leader in sustainable transportation, setting a standard that other cities aspire to follow. Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts. I hope we can work together to make Northampton an even better place for cyclists and all residents.
Thank you, Alex, for your comments. Anybody else for public comments? Okay, great. Okay, so first up on the order of business for the agenda is a draft version of modifications to the Complete Streets policy ordinance. And this will be sort of a joint conversation, a presentation, I guess, if you will, that about the policy and between myself and Donna. And I will screen share, but first, I think just sort of background. I think, Donna, I'll turn that over to you about if you want to talk about the details about, I mean, we can talk about the examples and remind folks of the last time this, was came into place. And I think this was sort of the impetus for the conversation that we want to have with you all as well as with TPC. So actually, sorry, I have to, I'm going to make you co-host. Sorry about that, Donna.
Had a similar reaction.
Okay, hi everyone. So yeah, just a little background. The Complete Streets Ordinance has a lot of requirements for how we reconstruct roadways and sidewalks, and they're actually enshrined in an ordinance. The history behind this is that city was required to create a policy and an ordinance. And that was back in 2015. That was an arrangement with the state through the former head of the planning department as part of funding that was secured for various projects around the city. So the Complete Streets Ordinance, though well-intended, creates a model where we have to put really significant financial resources into sidewalks and or specifically sidewalks on all streets which we propose to reconstruct in any way, including just in a mill and overlay. So what the Complete Streets Ordinance does is it sets really strict parameters around expectations for how we will reconstruct a roadway. What we're specifically talking about is if we're defining an area that's within a certain distance of a central business district or certain distance of K through 12 school, then we're required to install a particular type of sidewalk. That would be a cement sidewalk. And we're required to install it on both sides of the road. And that would be part of just a mill and overlay project. So what happens is we have to ask for a design exception, which has to be voted on by the Transportation Parking Commission in order to not install a cement concrete sidewalk on both sides of the road. And this would not be an issue if we had no budget constraints. But with the budget constraints that we have, we're having a very difficult time paving the roads that need attention and reconstructing the sidewalks that need attention, because oftentimes perfect is the enemy of the good. So we're taking a street, example of this would be Chestnut Street, which we just repaved. If we were to follow the ordinance actually requires concrete sidewalk on both sides of Chestnut Street for its length. But what that would do is create a impossible financial scenario for us where Chestnut Street would actually be one of the only streets we were able to pave because we have to put so many resources into a more expensive sidewalk treatment and install a sidewalk on both sides of the street where we just don't have right of way or we just don't have grades, or it's just not feasible primarily for topographic or geometric reasons, which then drive up the cost to just really make the project cost prohibitive. So we have to go to Transportation Parking Commission, sort of explain the situation, and then ask the Transportation Parking Commission to please grant us a design exception so that we can take the limited resources that we have and actually pave more roads and do more sidewalk work, rather than just kind of concentrating all of our resources in one particular place and making a, complete compliance with this ordinance, but now we're only going to be able to do this one roadway. So what Carolyn and I have tried to do is we have tried to sort of thread the needle in making proposed alterations to the ordinance to stay with the spirit of the ordinance, but give us a little more flexibility around kind of reconstructing roads in a way that is more consistent with the actual financial resources that we have to use. If we had millions and millions of dollars, we would not be having this conversation, but the reality is that we don't, and well over half of our roadways are in a state of complete disrepair, needing complete reconstruction in the tens of millions of dollars. So as time goes by and we continue to have these challenges, there actually is a really significant cost to this. So that's a little bit of background and why we're bringing forward this conversation at this time. And I think, Carolyn, if you maybe wanted to screen share a proposed version of changes, what we have tried to do is rewrite the ordinance to have more public process and more public comment around our projects, but to remove the approval authority, if you will, of a volunteer commission, which is the Transportation Parking Commission. So we had a preliminary conversation with the Disability Commission last night. This is now coming to Bike and Ped. And we're looking for feedback. We were looking for feedback from the Disability Commission. We're looking for feedback from this commission. We're not ready to bring this to Transportation Parking at this point because we want to hear feedback from all of you first.
So the specific details of the modification relate to a couple of the sections of the overall policy. So if looking at 285.51, it's the overall policy, and subsection A talks about the goal for the complete streets policy, and particularly in number 11, subsection 11 of A, it reads, ensure that the design and construction of all new, reconstructed, reclaimed, including mill and overlay projects, incorporate appropriate traffic calming measures, accessibility improvements, and bicycle and pedestrian facilities. So no proposed changes to that. The next section, mill and overlay projects shall include complete streets elements such as bike lanes and or sidewalks when geometrically and financially feasible. Design exceptions, because of either of these considerations, shall be presented to the Transportation and Parking Commission and Disabilities Commission for comment. And so the deletion here is really about bringing it to TPC for approval. And so it's shifting to getting comment about the evaluation of the geometric or financially infeasible situations that might restrict the ability of adding any complete streets elements during a mill and overlay type of project. And that would be, to Donna's point, because because there's such a financial implications, such significant financial implications, that putting that in front of TPC, that is not a body that determines, budgets, is probably not the most appropriate location for that. But nevertheless, comment is important And so this also adds sort of more flexibility to ensure that some kind of components are included in mill and overlay, and it's not just about sidewalks. And so that sort of broadens the ability to sort of address that, make streets better during a mill and overlay only project, but reduces the sort of the high threshold of having to mandating that sidewalks be part of that. So that's the first change that's proposed. And I think probably I'll go through the other two, and then I think it makes sense probably to hear feedback from the group. So section B is about materials and design components of each of those treatments. So it says currently cement concrete sidewalks on both sides of the street in all business districts, mixed use, and urban residential zoning districts when right-of-way width allows. So that would change to just focusing on cement concrete in the urban core districts and urban residential C districts. And then the option of using cement or bituminous on at least one side of the street in other districts within 1 mile of Florence Center, Northampton Central Business District, all K-12 schools, wherever a sidewalk would reduce the need for public school bus service along any new street. So all of this is existing language, not to be changed. And then add a sentence, crosswalks shall be provided at each intersection where sidewalks are present on both sides of the street. So just again, sort of adding more specificity about what would be important even in a mill and overlay project. And then the final paragraph modification is about the roundabouts, and you all had a conversation about, I don't know, 6 months ago about the about roundabouts at the high school. And so in this would change the language at tail end of that paragraph. Selection of signalization in lieu of roundabouts shall be presented to the Transportation and Parking Commission. Whereas currently it says the Transportation and Parking Commission shall approve any decision to use a signal instead of a roundabout, except in downtown and Florence Center. And so again, it is a way to have discussion and feedback and comment, but taking that sort of threshold of approval of such a significant item out. So those are the changes that have been drafted. And just let me know if you want me to keep or stop screen share for the conversation. I don't know what would be better for folks. I'll stop it for the moment. If someone wants me to pull it back up, that's fine. So any comments from members? Go ahead, James.
Thanks. Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks, Donna, for the thoughtful presentation and for working through the challenges that you have encountered as a result of the current policy and trying to implement it. Also, in case I missed this in the first 5 minutes, Donna, I just have to say, thanks for the bike path. Unbelievable job. It is unbelievable. Congratulations. Thank you so much. It was so fast. I've never seen anything like that in my life. Well done. So back to complete streets. I recognize I like the analogy of threading the needle, and we're certainly trying to achieve a compromise that meets the goals and values of complete streets. And I think the changes you've suggested here are reasonable under the severe budgetary constraints. And I guess one small thing and one big thing that I would offer to consider. The small thing is I would feel more comfortable adopting these changes if we could have a discussion and ideally encode some way of making that decision. So right now, the way the decision happens is DPW looks at it, says, we can't do this. The grade is impossible. It's going to cost $10 million. We don't have it. TPC, please give us an exception. TPC grants an exception. The way we're proposing it now is to remove TPC from that, and it would just be a consultative instead of authoritative role, and then who makes the decision and how. So I would love for us to be able to spell out at least what the values are for making that decision. And it right now it just says financially or I can't remember, geographically feasible in your new language. And I understand that, but it makes me a little uncomfortable that right now, okay, Donna and Carolyn, I trust you're going to make decisions that most of us are going to agree with, but what if in the future it's not you and it's somebody else? How would that decision get made? And then the second one is the bigger sort of meta question about how the city will grapple with the high cost of accommodating automobile traffic in general. And this is obviously a century-old problem where we spend in the US something like $10 billion a year on highways to promote car traffic that leads to climate change and 30 to 40,000 deaths a year. All the problems we know about with car traffic and transportation, and we're saddled by the economics of it. It's so much cheaper to invest in bike ped. So it's ironic, isn't it, that here we're saying that's too expensive to pay for bike ped when we have roads that we have to fix. And I'm sure the rationale is, well, roads can serve everybody, they can serve bicyclists as well, they do. But if we took all the money that we spent on roads and spent it all on bike ped, we would have that incredible bike ped paradise that that we long for. So how are we going to solve that? And I feel as if the current changes the suggested changes are not going to help us solve that. I'm not sure I have an easy solution, but that's what's troubling me. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Sean. Oh, you're muted.
Yes. I was trying to simultaneously lower my hand while unmuting myself, and I could only push one at a time. So thank you for your presentation. My question, it seems like the initial impetus for this was to kind of make it a little easier for projects to move forward. Going through the exception request through the TPC, does that prolong projects? Does that push projects out further than they could normally be done?
So we have very, very tight bidding schedules. In order to get favorable pricing, we have to be out to bid by February or March, so that we can get a contractor lined up. We wouldn't want to be putting out our projects in like April or May, because everyone already has their work lined up at that point. We have a very small pool of contractors and a very short construction season. We're only able to generate a project in the few months between the gap we have between our project that we just did is winding down and we need to go out to bid. So we have like a few months to generate a whole set of bid plans, and we're sort of in that few months right now. Now I need to go to TPC. It'll be in January. We have more than 20 streets that we want to do a mill and overlay on. I have a plan set ready to go based on our evaluation of the conditions and what I think we're going to have for money. And I'm on a very, very tight schedule. So if we play this out and I were to go to TPC and say, here are the design exceptions I need, here are the streets I want to pave, here are the sidewalks that we can do, and I think this is all affordable based on what we're going to ask City Council to appropriate if they vote yes. If TPC, based on the current ordinance, were to say, we don't approve this, everything stops at that point. I can't go to bid because I don't have the approval that I need. Everything, the entire project stops. So it's a lot to ask of a volunteer commission to sort of have, you're putting folks in a very, very difficult position it's actually putting a lot of people in a difficult position. You know, we're trying to do the best we can to take the resources we have and make the
Sure.
most positive impact we can for as many people as we can, whether they're on foot or on a bike or in a car. And we have such a tight window to work in that there's not a lot of room for, I mean, there's really no room for delay, or we're actually going to miss our bidding cycle. So yes, there's potential for significant delay.
Understood. Yeah, I can see how that time schedule certainly would favor a faster process. But I guess similar to James, I'd just say, knowing that there was some criteria that a project had to meet in order to avoid those requirements, that was very public, I think would be better than just someone in your office. And again, similarly to James, I'm not saying you or Carolyn are going to fast track some heinous project, but just projecting into the future when this policy will still be in place, just having some checks and balances in line to kind of keep us on track towards what we're shooting for, which I know everyone wants, but we can't always get.
So I have a follow-up question for both you and James. Is this in particular, do you think that more specificity around the question of the selection of signalization versus roundabouts is what you're thinking about in particular? So having more specific exceptions about why a signal is being selected over a roundabout?
I would say both the sidewalk case and the roundabout case. I mean, if there are good reasons, there are good reasons, but I think we should try to articulate those.
Okay.
Yeah, and my comment on that would be anything is possible with money, you know. So I mean, if we go back to like the high school, for example, you know, we talked about this on the Route 9 corridor by the high school. We looked at the feasibility of roundabouts. There's parkland on both sides of Route 9. With enough money and enough time, we actually could have potentially shoehorned a roundabout in there. But how much are we talking for money and how long are we talking for time? And are those two things the enemy of what is otherwise a reasonable solution? So I think that's the other part of the needle that we're trying to thread here. You can actually do anything you want if you have enough time and money, but both of those resources are limited.
Okay. So I'm going to keep on with the TPC discussion. This is because the TPC needs to work on this, so I'm not going to call on anybody from members of the public until unless we have time and after TPC has had a chance to discuss. So Brett, I'll go to you. Sorry, I realize I have to unmute you. I didn't realize that. I thought I had set that up. So go ahead, Brett.
Thanks. I guess I feel similarly to Sean and James in that these things seem well intentioned, but it seems like I don't quite understand the need. What's the problem we're trying to solve, I guess is my question. I've heard talk about timeline, but we're still going to have to go to both the Disability Commission and the TPC for comment before we can move forward. So timeline doesn't seem like it's an issue still. Has the TPC been declining to grant the exceptions, or is it just a fear of that? And maybe that's a important enough fear to make changes for. But I also wonder, like, how much should we be consolidating the decision-making authority for these things you know, should it be the TPC, which has 2 city councilors on it, along with the department heads and some citizens who are well informed? I don't see why not, that small, well-informed group. And in terms of the timeline, can't we just start earlier if there's concern of some contentious issue? And then lastly, the issue of perfect being the enemy of the good. Again, I haven't seen TPC not grant the exceptions. So I'm trying to figure out, like, if the long-term goals are still to put in as many sidewalks as we can, put in as many high-quality sidewalks as we can, put in roundabouts where we can, I don't see why we would strip down the language some. So those are my comments for now, but also Carolyn, I'm disappointed that we didn't get this ahead of the meeting so that I could look at it on a bigger screen. Thank you. I hope we can talk about it again next meeting.
Yeah, we can certainly take as much time as it needs. I'll answer one of the questions. I think it's not necessarily timing for everything, but it certainly is that language about approval. So going back to that high school roundabout discussion, if the TPC voted to say, you know what, we think that a roundabout is more appropriate, and we don't think the design team has evaluated X, Y, or Z, so we're not going to approve this. Then that sets up a potentially significant financial burden, I would say, to the city, which is out of their jurisdiction. Like, the TPC doesn't have jurisdiction to decide budget items. And so I think that's probably the biggest is the weight of approval. And so I think the most recent example is the roundabout question that came up at the high school. And there was this whole discussion about, well, how can, what authority do we have to do this? And this is putting us in a difficult situation. So I just threw it out there, and Donna probably has some more to add.
Yeah, and for those who sit on TPC, you may remember the conversation about both the roundabout and the design exceptions that I needed for this year's paving project. And for the commissioners on TPC, there was a conversation around, like, this is a really difficult position to put us in. Like, what are we supposed to say? Like, what are our options here? We say no, and now, all of these paving projects get derailed, or back to the drawing board, or we're going to take a whole year off. And that's really why we decided we needed to take a closer look at this ordinance. We're putting a volunteer commission in a really impossible position where the only vote is yes, or it has really huge operational and financial ramifications to city operations. If we don't pave 22 streets next year, people are going to notice that, and they're actually going to be in worse condition the next year, and now they're going to cost an order of magnitude more, since another year has gone by while we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. So this alteration to the ordinance was actually in response to that conversation at TPC, and understanding that we are putting people in a very difficult position.
So
Carolyn, may I just quickly respond?
Yeah. Yep.
Thanks. That addresses a lot of that, but I still don't understand why we can't just start earlier to have those conversations that may be contentious or that may need more education. Because I do hear that. You're right. I remember that conversation now, and it is an issue, and everybody present agreed that some change was needed. I'm just not sure this is quite what we wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I also have to think of my staff capacity. I mean, we're running millions and millions of dollars worth of work a year out of the DPW. We're not just running roadway construction, we're running utility reconstruction. You know, we're running upwards of $50 million right now in projects. So I have to think about staff capacity, and I have a very, very short turnaround time for a lot of these projects. The bike path is a great example of this. I mean, when we move, we have to move quickly. We have a very short construction season, and we are competing for resources with every other municipality in the region who also has a short construction season. So we don't have years or months to sort of, have these ongoing conversations. I mean, we have to turn this stuff around. And while we're planning, we are losing control of our roadways. We are losing control of our sidewalks with each, passing season. They are falling into more disrepair. And then the treatment that we have to do to bring them back to some sort of baseline is becoming that much more expensive. So we have to think about capacity, and we have to think about the level of responsibility that DPW has citywide for things we're not even discussing on this commission, like the sewer system and, the cemeteries, and snow and ice operations, and all of these things that we're responsible for that we're not even discussing here.
Okay, so I mean, from this initial conversation, it definitely sounds like there's concern, and maybe we could look at the language a bit and bring it back. We have a really full agenda, and so I want to make sure that we get to at least a couple of the other items on the agenda. So I'm not going to entertain public comment now. We really just wanted to have this conversation with the Bike Ped Committee, so that we can get to the other items on the agenda, some of which we might just go ahead and punt to another date. I think I'm going to go out of order a little bit, because we do have Jim Nash asked to come to this committee to talk about an update on the Main Street communication campaign. And so I think what I'll do is go ahead and move the POP campaign conversation up, and then when Jim's done, we can address some of the other agenda items that we didn't have a chance to get to. And then we'll just move the ones that we absolutely don't get to the next agenda. So Jim, why don't you go ahead and present or talk about what you're interested in talking about.
Thank you, Carol. It's so nice to see everybody. So, and I promised Carolyn I would go fast, that I just want to provide you guys with an update. So POP, Pardon Our Progress campaign, started to come together last spring, and now we're really starting to kick into gear. We're expecting plans from MassDOT to be coming forward at some point. But so the POP partnership consists of the DNA, the Greater Northampton Chamber, and the city, that we're working collaboratively to work on a campaign to get us through the downtown rebuild. And that was really the initial idea behind it. But what we're seeing is that we actually have a bigger mission, which is to start promoting our downtown now, and that there's going to be this thing called construction. And then on the other end of it, we're going to have a rebuilt downtown. But we want to start promoting downtown now, get events going, get people back to being interested in events and using our downtown services. The team recently, we're now broken out into 4 different action teams. We have an outreach team, which I'm part of and doing my job right here. We have a business support team that's featuring a lot of folks from both the chamber, the city, and the DNA. And right now they're working on a survey that's going to be going out to the downtown business community to really figure out, basically a year before construction's going to happen, what their needs are going to be, and set their priorities for, you know, when we roll stuff out, what it is they really need. We have a project, with Carolyn and city folks will be overseeing the team that rolls out the information around the construction and any plans that the city can have around mitigation. That's our third team. The last team has to do with chasing down any money that we can, whether for technical assistance or, you know, some people have talked about, is there money that can go to businesses? That can't go through the city. The city can't just give money to businesses, but there, with the other players, there may be some ways that we can help people through things. Concrete things that we have in place outside of those teams that are starting to come together. The mayor recently has started putting out a newsletter. Updates around what's going on with the project will be a regular feature of that. We also are taking the app that we use for, what's it called? It's on my phone, Carolyn, you know, where we get the updates about
Code Red.
Code Red, yes, and we're going to be using that, an adaptation of that. If anybody who's really interested in getting regular updates on what's going on with construction, that we'll be able to push out information like, yes, these parking spaces will be the ones, you know, this is where the construction will be, or a water main broke. That will be able to provide more instantaneous information to the folks who want it. Not everybody wants that much detail. So we're still awaiting plans from MassDOT, and that, Carolyn, do we know when they're going to show up soon, right?
It's still in process. We'll be letting people know the next update, so it won't be till spring.
The plans aren't going to come till spring?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. But also the other message that I'm delivering to people is that next year, the expectation is that it's in terms of construction starts next year, but the only thing that'll happen next fall will really be just the removal of the medians, like near the Main Street intersection and up near the Academy of Music. Is that still good information, Carolyn?
Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of the phasing of those at the 75% is to start sort of, you know, mobilization and sort of the initial removal of barriers and things. And that would likely happen. That would be the first phase for sure, and might happen before the winter shutdown. Yeah.
Right. And so we're sharing this information so people get a sense. It starts next year, but it's not going to be the big part of the project. That there might be some disruptions, there's work being done, but it's not Main Street being dug up and rebuilt just yet. That will be happening the following year. And when the plans come out in the spring, as Carolyn is mentioning, that's when we get into the greater detail around what specifically is going to happen. So that's my pop update. So did I talk fast enough?
You were good. Any questions for Jim before we circle back to some of the other items?
Jim, is there anything that this group should be doing to support your efforts?
You know what, Brett, that's a great question, because part of the outreach team is that I'm here to let you know what we're doing, that there's a pop campaign. It's this great collaboration. Right now, it's about 12 different people. People with the Chamber, with MassWorks and Valley CDC. And we just want everybody to get the idea. People are working on this, that the people's concerns. There's a lot of anxiety out there that people are actually working on this. And that if you could just share You've heard from the POP campaign. I've heard that the city and the chamber and the DNA are working together, and that, as we get more information, we will continue to roll it out. If I get information, I'd like to make another appearance here at some other point. And I'm going to be doing this with you guys. I'm going to do it with Youth Commission and our other allies in this project. So did I answer? I think I answered your question, Brett.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other
Thank you,
questions?
Carolyn. Thanks for
Jen?
giving me the time, and I'm going to stick around and listen to what the other stuff you guys are talking about.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Jen. All right, so let's go back. Brett, let's go back to the I put this on the agenda. Brett had asked to sort of see if the committee could brainstorm, think about strategies that like PED could potentially have, or other citizens groups to help in this, maintenance issue, and sort of explore more, essentially, I think, and I don't want to take your words, Brett, but if there are ways that, there could be more collaboration in to reach the same goal that the city has, and not always just have the single burden on the city for maintenance when we are so strapped with resources and capacity.
Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, I don't need to belabor this, but I wanted to provide a place for it. And if it's better to punt this to another meeting where we have more time to talk about it, that's fine. But I'll at least introduce it now. I heard from some folks in the community that the paths aren't maintained to their preferred standards, and I sometimes agree and sometimes don't, but I definitely wanted to hear that and make sure that we think about how can we best maintain those paths to the full width, as Alex Bowman mentioned earlier, and I hope Alex will get to speak on this as well. FNT does a great job of coordinating some events through the year to cut back brush and invasives and things. And the city has been doing an increasingly excellent job of clearing snow from paths, from, sweeping, cutting, all the things that they do to maintain them. And obviously repaving them is recently on the list. But how can this group and other advocacy groups in the community, how can they help? How can we help to, as Carolyn said, ease the burden on the DPW that's so strapped? So I want to open it up to the other members of this subcommittee and of the public for any ideas, questions, comments. And that includes from Donna or Karen may have suggestions that are of particular need they may see.
Go ahead, James.
Thanks, Brett, for raising the issue. It seems there are a couple of different possible avenues that we could pursue. One is building out the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure further, making sure that that pedestrian routes are connected, making sure that bike routes are connected. Another could be focusing on the existing infrastructure so that potholes are filled and cracks are filled and bushes are cut back. Another could be education and enforcement, so that crosswalks are respected by drivers. So how, I guess maybe I'll just ask you, Brett, what you have in mind as the priorities in ways that the city is already trying, but we want to consider ways to supplement those efforts. Do you have a clear, what's top of your list, Brett?
I lost most of the middle of your comment, but what's top of my list for things? I think I was mainly thinking about, clearing debris or invasive growth from the sides of paths. I think that's mainly the topic that I was hearing most recently, and I've heard snow removal in the past as a recurring theme that DPW doesn't have capacity for. And I think we probably need to continue to push for that in some way, but mainly, I think I was mainly thinking about during the growing season and the maintenance of paths so that what we have can fully be used.
Would you include, if I can just follow up on that, would you include clearing snow from sidewalks?
Yeah, I would. Any of the usable public spaces that allow, that facilitate people to bike and walk. I think that's the focus of this subcommittee, and I think that's maybe not what I wrote as an agenda item title, but I think that is in the spirit of it.
So I feel like if I could just throw out there, I think the snow clearing on sidewalks is, if there's an idea for this group to sort of come up with a community effort for doing that, that there may be something there. Obviously, the requirement in most cities, certainly Northampton, is that property owners are responsible for sidewalk clearing in front of their property. So that's not either DPW is not doing their job and so someone else has to do it. It's really the responsibility of the property owners. And so there could be an educational component about that. Maybe property owners forget or aren't aware of their responsibility. There might be something there, but I would just be, there's there's a distinction between snow clearing, I think, on sidewalks and then, general maintenance of the road and bike infrastructure network. And I would add, obviously, Friends of Northampton Trails does an amazing job of having these work days on the bike paths, but that is there's a lot of path to cover, and it's a big task for one group, and it could be sort of, I'm thinking a little bit about where we have in some of our conservation areas, we sort of have almost like neighborhood friends of groups. So not just a one behemoth Friends of Northampton Trails, but maybe there could be neighborhood groups that are then identified to focus on certain sections, certainly for brush clearing and trash removal and that kind of debris removal. I don't know what that looks like from an organizational standpoint, but I'm just throwing that out there as sort of a model that we have in our conservation areas for having sort of targeted portions of our conservation areas addressed that way. I'll go to Sean before going to the public comment.
Thanks, Carolyn. Kind of along those lines, I know we rely heavily on FMT to do a lot of the work on the path. Is there any possibility of putting up some signage thanking them on the path? Sort of like when you're rolling down the highway and you see this section of route so-and-so is maintained by this company. Can we do something like that for FMT to publicly thank them for all of their work on the path?
Yeah, we actually had at some point, I don't know, this has been up for a while. We've had sort of adopt a trail kind of acknowledgements. And, you know, for F&T, it could be like adopt the city acknowledgement kind of thing. But yes, I think we could talk about that, think about that. I mean, we don't want to fill up the trails with signs, but, you know, something modest might make sense. Any other comments? So here's, I think from a procedural standpoint, we typically run for an hour. We obviously have a lot of, we have a couple of other agenda items that we can certainly put to the next agenda. It's coming up on 4 o'clock, but maybe to continue this conversation, if I can, you know, take a couple of comments, short, quick 1-minute comments from the members of the public. And then if it makes sense to the rest of the committee, we can continue this conversation as well as the other ones that that we didn't get to on the agenda in our January meeting. And that might also allow some opportunity and time for people on the committee to think about this particular subject a little bit more through the holiday period till we meet again in January, if that works for everyone. Okay, so I think I saw Alex Bowman with his hand raised first. So give you a minute there and then we'll go to Claudia for a minute.
So one of the key spots that I've seen issues with is along the railroad track. Wet leaves, tons of wet leaves. They get traveled over, they turn into muck, they freeze and thaw, they get plowed and become big frozen blocks on the side of the trail. I don't know if CPA funds could be used for machinery to manage this type of equipment. You know, I see that the DCR does a much better job blowing all their leaves about 15 feet away from the path. I don't know if we could do something similar or we could collect them. I have personally spent 4 hours going from almost the bridge, the downtown bridge to the North Ave bridge with my own equipment, pushing stuff back, cleaning off the blacktop where it's, you know, 18 inches has been covered. So it's a real, to me, it's a real issue.
Great, thanks, Alex. Okay, Claudia?
Hi, just to say, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I was at the Disability Commission meeting yesterday, and they're also talking about how to improve sidewalk snow removal, and they're creating a PSA. And so perhaps this is something this committee could coordinate with them. I don't know if that will complicate their effort or they'll welcome your input, but just to say they're working on this as well.
Thanks, Claudia. Go ahead, Devin.
I want to go back to the ordinance. As a member of TPC, I see every reason why it is a problem to go to a volunteer committee when, in fact, I have a great deal of confidence in the technical expertise at the DPW to make those kind of proposals. So I think you should send that out to us, Carolyn, so that we can have the conversation you wanted to have next meeting. But I really do. I think it even blends into the story about Main Street. It's traffic engineers are trained to do the work they do. And so I take a great deal of confidence in the proposals that come to us. And I can't think of TPC disapproving a proposal from Donna or from you. So that's what I wanted to say. And the last thing is just as an idea, I'm a big fan of the mayor's newsletter. And I think this is a timely, you know, right as winter's coming on, to remind people that they have responsibilities for their sidewalk and sort of bring that to the forefront for the winter. Thanks.
Thanks, Devin. Okay, so any other wrap-up comments about the items we did discuss? And we can do to be continued for the other item? Great. Well, thank you all for joining. I know we had quite a bit to cover, so we'll just keep plugging away at it. And if I could get a motion to adjourn, that would be great. And a second.
So
James, was that a motion? Okay, thanks.
Devin,
And a second? Thanks.
Second.
So we'll do a roll call. James? Sean?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
Devin?
Yes.
Donna?
Yes.
And I vote yes too. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it. And we'll see you in January. Have a good rest of your December.